An increasing number of countries are promising net zero emissions by the year 2050. But before that milestone is reached, many hurdles stand in the way, such as global cooperation on climate change. This narrative was further driven at the concluded COP28 in Dubai, with Nigeria in attendance, amongst about over 190 other nations, for negotiations towards transitioning from fossil fuels. That's our focus on Special Report.
Look up. There I am. I am the sky. I am a warm, protective blanket wrapped around everyone on Earth. I can bring clouds, rain, and wind. I can be an ice storm. Without me, you'd fry. Every day, I am the breath you take in, yet you are making me sick. I am congested, off balance, polluted. You see, I am more delicate than you think. It took millions of years to get it just right. My perfect mix of gases, temperature, and weather that you enjoy. But now your cars, your factories, and dust, they have pushed me past the limit. And you wonder why my typhoons and tornadoes are more intense, more frequent. I have become unpredictable. Less rain here, a lot more rain there. Hotter summers, colder winters. I cannot even control myself anymore. Enough about me. I will show my changing self to you in your days ahead. But in the end, I'll be fine. Give me a few thousand years. I have weathered trauma before. I am not worried for myself. Look up.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to take your seats as the opening ceremony will be starting shortly.
The Global Climate Summit COP28 began with an air of expectation in Dubai, the UAE. The meeting begins a series of engagements during his two-day trip to Dubai ahead of the summit. King Charles went on to make a speech later in the course of the conference, the first time he will deliver the opening address at the conference as king.
I've spent a large proportion of my life trying to warn of the existential threats facing us over global warming, over climate change and biodiversity loss. But I was not alone. For instance, Sheikh Mohammed's dear father, Sheikh Zayed, was advocating for clean energy at a time even before the United Arab Emirates as such came into being. All these decades later, and despite all the attention, there is 30% more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere now than there was back then, and almost 40% more methane. Some important progress has been made, but it worries me greatly that we remain so dreadfully far off track, as the Global Stocktake report demonstrates so graphically. The dangers are no longer distant risks. I have seen across the Commonwealth and beyond countless communities which are unable to withstand repeated shocks, whose lives and livelihoods are laid waste by climate change. Surely, real action is required to stem the growing toll of its most vulnerable victims. Repeated cyclones batter vulnerable island nations like Vanuatu and Dominica. India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan have been experiencing unprecedented floods, and East Africa is suffering a decades-long drought. This past summer, in common with Spain, Greece, the United States, and many other countries, Canada experienced its most severe wildfire season on record, with 18.5 million hectares of land burned, causing terrible loss of life and property, and of course, releasing enormous amounts of greenhouse gases that contribute to dangerous feedback loops to which climate scientists have been alerting us for decades. As I've tried to say on many occasions, unless we rapidly repair and restore nature's unique economy based on harmony and balance, which is our ultimate sustainer, our own economy and survivability will be imperiled. As we work towards a zero carbon future, we must work equally towards being nature positive. With what we are witnessing, our choice now is a starker and darker one. How dangerous are we actually prepared to make our world? Dealing with this is a job for us all. Change will come by working together and making it easier to embrace decisions that will sustain our world.
And U.S. climate envoy John Kerry told other countries that the first thing they could do to meet the targets on transitioning away from fossil fuel use in the COP28 was to stop building new unabated coal.
5 years ago, people didn't talk about methane in the context of the climate crisis. And in Glasgow, President Biden stood up and said, we're going to have a methane challenge. That by 2030, 30% a reduction across the board, not for one nation, but globally. And if we achieve that 30% reduction, which we think we can, it is the equivalent of every airplane, every car, every truck, every ship in the world going to zero in that period of time. That is monumental, folks. And so we're very appreciative of all those who have embraced this notion. We know, and it's almost cliched now, and I'm going to try to resist it. I don't want to get into the crisis of the moment or the level of the crisis or where we are. But let me just tell you bluntly, when the best scientists in the world unanimously are telling us as leaders in our countries that we are on the brink of tipping points from which you cannot come back, irreversible, that the permafrost or the Barents Sea ice or the coral reefs, or most importantly, the Arctic and the Antarctic may be at tipping point or beyond. Last summer, it was 70 degrees Fahrenheit above normal in the Arctic. It was 100 degrees Fahrenheit above normal in the Antarctic. And a massive component of ice that had been lodged in the mud because it was so heavy, it was stuck there, has now melted sufficiently that it's risen and moving across the Southern Ocean towards Georgia Island, and it will melt and accelerate the sea level rise of the planet. So this year, we just learned yesterday, it was confirmed, it's not when we learned it, was the hottest year in history, human history, that we measured. But that's true now of every year almost. For the last 30 years, three decades ago was the third now warmest. The second decade was the second warmest, and this last decade, the warmest in history. So I'm not going to say more about it, except to say that if we can't hear Mother Nature and can't judge with our own eyes what the science is telling us, this is not about politics, there's no ideology, there's no pejorative against any one business or any approach. There is simply mathematics and physics and some chemistry and biology. That is what we are acting on. So we, fortunately, were able to come to agreement with China and the United States that we are, as the two largest emitters in the world, obviously we understand it's important for us to be able to find cooperation here. No one country, no business anywhere in the world will solve this problem by itself. It will take the essence of multilateralism and global cooperation to be able to make this happen. Reducing methane emissions by at least 30% in 2030 is totally in line with the global methane pledge, which could avoid over 0.2 degrees centigrade of warming by 2050.
World leaders signed a food security deal at the COP28, in which 134 countries would integrate food systems into climate plans by 2025.
Today, we celebrate a milestone moment in history for food systems and agriculture at a COP. I am pleased to announce, drum rolling, that the COP28 UAE Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems and Climate Action has so far received 134 endorsements. I know it says 120 on there. This was what we had to give in about 2 days ago, but we reached 134 endorsements from heads of state and government. This truly is a historic moment for food systems and will really raise the profile of agriculture and climate in all these respective countries. With these countries, by the way, we cover more than 5.7 billion people and 70% of all food we eat. The signatories of the declaration are home to nearly 500 million farmers and represent 75% of all emissions from global food systems. A big thank you to all of you who have endorsed the declaration and contributed to this watershed moment for food and climate agenda. And we look forward for many more joining in the next few days. Now, this is a first step, and sometimes this first step is the hardest step, but over the coming few days, we will be holding several workshops on how to ensure we can effectively implement the declaration. Because as you know, this is all about action. Now, we all know the two ingredients for implementation as set out in the declaration. It's funding and innovations. Now, before I talk about that, I don't know if any of you have noticed about the food that's being served here at COP28. So we have taken the initiative to ensure that the food menus that are being served are 1.5 degrees Celsius aligned. We have trained our chefs, suppliers, catering companies to ensure that the climate-conscious food is being served here across Expo as part of the wider goal of hosting a carbon-neutral conference, because we, the UAE, believe it's so important to walk the talk.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that one key to success of the COP28 climate summit was for nations to reach an agreement on the need to phase out fossil fuels, albeit with countries possibly moving at different rates.
We cannot save a burning planet via fire hose of fossil fuels. We must accelerate a just, equitable transition to renewables. The science is clear. The 1.5-degree limit is only possible if we ultimately stop burning all fossil fuels. Not reduce, not abate, phase out with a clear time frame aligned with 1.5 degrees. And the global stocktake must not only commit to that, it must also commit to triple renewables, double energy efficiency, and bring clean energy to all by 2030. The economics are clear. The global shift to renewables is inevitable. The only question is how much heating our planet will endure before it happens. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is recommending ending our addiction to coal by 2030 in OECD countries and 2040 for the rest of the world. At the same time, according to the International Energy Agency, the oil and gas industry accounts for just 1% of clean energy investment. Excellencies, the climate challenge is not just another issue in your inbox. Protecting our climate is the world's greatest test of leadership. And so I urge you to lead. Humanity's fate hangs in the balance. Make this COP count. Make this COP a game changer. Make this COP the renewal hope in the future of humankind.
Seth, you know very well.
The future role of fossil fuel was by far the most contentious issue at the COP28 summit in Dubai.
The language around fossil fuels is complicated and the views of it are complicated. And it's important that we have the right language when it comes to fossil fuels. It's important that we think about how we get that balance. There are those who want phase out. There are those who want phase down. There are those who want different formulations. The point is to get a consensus. And we don't want one formulation that causes blockages in the process. We need the parties to come together because we need to come back to what's the objective. The objective is to achieve 1.5, is to reduce global emissions by 43%, by 22 gigatons. What is this COP about? This COP is about the next 7 years. It's about how do we get back on track for the Paris Agreement. We've said as a presidency, we think fossil fuel language needs to be part of that. Now we need the parties to say, how do they land? We've spent a year knowing that language doesn't work.
President Bola Tinubu said that Nigeria is committed to eliminating oil and gas releases of methane as part of a global plan to rein in emissions that contribute to climate change. At the United Nations Climate Conference in Dubai, which came after an agreement between the US and China in Sunnyland, California in November to jointly tackle global warming by ramping up renewable energy with the goal of displacing fossil fuel.
It's very good. And we are with you. Even though we are the least beneficiary of what has happened, sitting there hearing you, I know I have to commit ourselves. And we have been doing so before today. We are committed to critical steps to reduce methane emission by ensuring flared gas are eliminated. There's a huge penalty for that. There's equally a huge incentive to do so. The measures that we're taking here is a welcome development, no doubt about that. And we are with the leadership of UAE for the commitment so far. We are consolidating on the gas export usage domestically and export for other countries. I can assure you that we will be partner in progress to achieve renewables. We are committed to energy mix. We are providing cooking gas for a large population. We will continue to do that. We've signed off on reduction of methane. We will leverage on new technology. And we hope the two giant nations and the Emirates will be able to help us through. What I know of Africa is the fact that the risk in additional investment and technological know-how, it is very necessary. and the largest economies that have benefited immensely to do more very fast because their health need healing and is crying for attention more quickly.
We have the basis to make transformational change happen. Let us finish what we have started. Let us unite, act, and now deliver.
The Climate Summit nations agreed to a deal to transition away from fossil fuels, which scientists say is the last best hope of averting climate catastrophe. The historic deal was struck by nearly 200 countries gathered for the conference. It marked the first time in 3 decades of COP climate summits that nations have agreed on a concerted move away from oil, gas, and coal, which account for about 80% of global energy.
Over the last 2 weeks, we have worked very hard to secure a better future for our people and our planet. We should be proud of our historic achievement. And the United Arab Emirates, my country, is rightly proud of its role in helping you to move this forward. Ladies and gentlemen, the world needed to find a new way. And by following our North Star, we have found that new path. We have delivered a comprehensive response to the global stocktake and all other mandates. Together, we have confronted realities and we have set the world in the right direction. We have given it a robust action plan to keep 1.5 within reach. It is a plan that is led by the science. It is a balanced plan that tackles emissions, bridges the gap on adaptation, reimagines global finance, and delivers on loss and damage. It is built on common ground. It is strengthened by full inclusivity, and it is reinforced by collaboration. It is an enhanced, balanced, but make no mistake, historic package to accelerate climate action. It is the UAE consensus.
COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber hailed a climate deal approved by almost 200 countries as a historic package of measures which offered a robust plan to keep the target of 1.5 degrees centigrade within reach. As enhanced, the deal was balanced, but make no mistake, he said in his words, historic package to accelerate climate action. He added a note for caution for nations that an agreement was only as good as its implementation.
It's imperative that a worthy manner and number of protections for the environment is key to preservation of the planet, in spite of industrialization, which can be a double-edged sword. For Special Report, I'm Olumide Macaulay. Thank you for watching.